"My in-laws are inviting us to dinner tonight," Raphael told me yesterday afternoon. He was smiling like a child, as if nothing bad could ever happen in this world, as if love was enough to protect him from everything. I just nodded. I just said yes, because that's what I do. I've always said yes. I've always been there, quiet, invisible, the mother who doesn't bother anyone, the mother who doesn't ask questions, the mother who accepts whatever she's given. But that night, sitting at that long, cold table with white tablecloths that looked more like a shroud than a celebration, something inside me began to break. And it wasn't the sound of the plates, it wasn't the clinking of the glasses, it was the silence, that dense silence that falls on a woman when no one looks at her anymore, when no one expects anything from her, when she's just a body taking up space in a chair. One more name on the guest list. The groom's mother, nothing more. Raphael was radiant. He had that light in his eyes that only men in love have, or blind men. Sometimes it's the same thing. Fabiana was by his side, beautiful, elegant, with that Italian accent that sounded like music. She moved her hands when she talked. She laughed loudly. She touched Raphael's arm with a familiarity that hurt me, not out of jealousy, but because I no longer received those gestures. It had been years since my son had touched me like that, with affection, with presence. I was a piece of furniture in his life, useful when needed, forgettable when not. Alma Fabiana's mother was sitting across from me, tall, imposing, with that perfectly styled brown hair and those jewels that sparkled under the dining room light. She was smiling too, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a polite smile, the kind you use in photos, in formal meetings, at funerals. I tried to be nice. I tried to make conversation, but my words fell to the floor like stones. No one picked them up. No one listened to them. Dinner dragged on slowly, endlessly. I ate in silence. I watched. I listened. Raphael talked about his plans, about the wedding, about the honeymoon, about the house they were buying, a big house, modern, with a yard. I smiled when he said it would have a room for me, a guest room, because that's what I am now, a guest in my own son's life. Fabiana and Alma spoke to each other in Italian, sometimes, not all the time, only when they wanted to say something Raphael wasn't supposed to understand yet, or that I was never supposed to understand. But I understood every word, every syllable, every pause, every stifled laugh, because I lived in Italy. 15 years of my life were spent in Florence, working, studying, loving, losing. But nobody knows that, not even Raphael, because he never asked. He never cared where his mother came from. He only cared that she was there, quiet, available, invisible. Then Raphael stood up. He said he was going to take the plates to the kitchen. He was always polite, always helpful. I taught him that. To respect, to help, to not let women carry the whole burden alone. How ironic. Because now he leaves me alone carrying the weight of this loneliness, of this silent abandonment, of this living death that is being a forgotten mother. And as soon as Raphael left the dining room, everything changed. Fabiana leaned toward her mother. Alma moved closer to her, and they started talking, in Italian, quickly, quietly, as if sharing a delicious secret. And they laughed. My God, how they laughed, with that laugh that isn't joy, it's cruelty, it's contempt, it's the sound evil makes when it feels safe, when it thinks no one is watching, when it thinks the victim doesn't understand. But I understood, every word, every insult, every taunt. Fabiana said I looked like a peasant, that my hands were rough, that my clothes were cheap, that I smelled old. Alma laughed. She said it didn't matter, that soon I wouldn't be a problem, that after the wedding, Raphael would do whatever they said, that men in love are easy to manage, that I would be sent to some nursing home, or simply forgotten, like an old dog that's no longer useful. And then they said something else, something that chilled my blood. Fabiana said Raphael had a lot of money, more than she thought, that she had seen the documents, the bank accounts, the properties, everything. Alma asked how much. Fabiana said a number: $200,000 in savings, a paid-off house, investments. Alma let out a low laugh, deep, satisfied. She said everything would go according to plan, that after the wedding they would transfer everything. Little by little, without him noticing, and when there was nothing left, they would disappear. Just like they always did. Just like they always did. Those 3 words stabbed me like knives, because they meant this wasn't the first time. That my son wasn't the first. That there were other men, other victims, other broken hearts and empty accounts, and my Raphael, my boy, my only son, was about to become just one more. An anecdote they would tell while laughing at some other table, in some other country, with some other lovesick fool. I just sat there, still, motionless, with my hands in my lap, my gaze fixed on my empty plate. I didn't say anything, I didn't move, I didn't let my face reveal a thing, because I have learned to be invisible, I have learned to disappear. I have learned that women like me survive by becoming shadows, when they stop existing for others, when they become nothing. But inside something was waking up, something dark, something cold, something that had been asleep for years, decades, a whole lifetime of silence, of obedience, of acceptance. It was ending. Because a mother can endure anything, any humiliation, any pain, but she cannot stay still when they are about to destroy her son. She cannot remain silent when they are about to steal everything from him, his money, his future, his dignity, his life. Raphael came back from the kitchen, smiling, oblivious, happy. He sat down next to Fabiana. She caressed his cheek, said something sweet to him in Italian, something about love, about the future, about eternity. He looked at her as if she were an angel, and I looked at them, at all 3 of them, at the 2 snakes and my lamb, and I thought about how easy it would be to say everything right now, to scream, to reveal, to expose, but I didn't, because that wasn't the moment, because revenge isn't a shout, it's a whisper, it's patience, it's strategy. It's waiting for the exact moment for the truth to strike like lightning and destroy everything. Fabiana and Alma looked at me, for a second. Their eyes met mine, and in that instant, I saw something in their faces. It wasn't fear, it was contempt. It was that absolute certainty that I was nothing, that I didn't matter, that I didn't understand, that I was just a silly old woman who would soon be discarded. And I let them think that. I let them believe they had won, that I was harmless, that I was invisible. But they didn't know. They didn't know who I was before I became this silent woman. They didn't know I had survived worse things, greater losses, deeper pains. They didn't know I had learned to speak Italian not in a classroom, but in the streets of Florence, in the markets, in the hospitals, in the cemeteries. They didn't know that every word they said, every plan they revealed, every cruel laugh they shared was burned into my memory like fire on skin. Dinner ended. We said our goodbyes. Alma gave me a kiss on the cheek, cold, empty. Fabiana hugged me, brief, superficial. Raphael walked me to the door. He asked me if I liked the dinner, if I liked his in-laws, if I was happy for him. I said yes, to everything, because that's what I'm supposed to say. Because that's what they expect from me. The mother who doesn't cause problems, the mother who just nods, the mother who disappears when she's no longer needed. But as I walked to my car under that dark, starless sky, I was no longer the same woman who had arrived. Something had changed, something had broken, and something new was being born, something they didn't expect, something no one expected. Because silent women aren't always asleep. Sometimes they're just waiting, watching, planning, and when they wake up, the world trembles. Raphael was born in the spring, on a cold, rainy day in April. I was 23, I was young, I was strong, I was a different person, a person who no longer exists, a person buried under years of sacrifice and silence. When I held him for the first time, when I felt his warm weight against my chest, when I heard that cry that was pure new life, I thought nothing bad could ever touch me. I thought love was enough. I thought being a mother was the strongest shield in the world. How wrong I was. His father left when Raphael was 4. There was no shouting, no violence. Just one morning, he got up, made his coffee, looked at me with those empty eyes that hadn't really seen me in a long time, and said he was leaving, that he had met someone else, that he was sorry. But he wasn't, not really. Men who leave never feel anything. Just relief, just the freedom to leave behind what no longer serves them. And I stayed, with a small child, with a low-paying job, with an apartment that smelled like dampness and broken dreams. I worked every job, cleaning houses, waiting tables in restaurants, taking care of other people's children while mine waited alone at home. Raphael grew up fast, too fast. Sometimes I'd come home and find him asleep on the sofa with the TV on. Other times he'd be awake looking at me with those big eyes, asking without words why I was never there, why I always came home late, why I was always tired. But I loved him. God knows I loved him. Every cent I earned was for him, every extra hour, every double shift, every sleepless night. Everything was for Raphael, so he would have clean clothes, so he would eat well, so he could go to school, so he wouldn't feel like he was missing anything, even if I was missing everything, even if I was disappearing little by little, even if my youth was burning away like a candle no one watches. When Raphael was 12, I got a better job. In an office. It didn't pay much, but it was stable. I could get home earlier. I could be with him, cook dinner together, help him with his homework, watch movies on weekends. Those were good years, quiet years. Raphael was a good kid, studious, respectful. Sometimes he asked about his father. I told him he was far away, that he had his own life, that he had left us because he wasn't happy. Raphael would nod. He didn't ask again. He learned early on that there are silences it's better not to break. The years passed. Raphael finished high school. He went to college, studied business, got a job at a big company, started earning good money, much better than me. He bought a car. He moved to a bigger apartment. He'd invite me to dinner on Sundays. Sometimes he'd call during the week. He'd ask how I was, if I needed anything. I always said no, that I was fine, that he shouldn't worry. Because that's what mothers do. They protect, even from their own needs. Then he met Fabiana. It was 2 years ago, on a business trip to Miami. She worked at the hotel where he was staying. That's what he told me, that she was an event coordinator, that she was Italian, that she spoke 4 languages, that she was beautiful and smart, that he'd never met anyone like her. I listened. I smiled. I said I was happy for him, but something in my chest tightened. Something told me this wasn't good, that this wouldn't end well. The first time I saw her was 3 months later. Raphael brought her to dinner. Fabiana walked into my house like someone entering a place unworthy of her presence. She looked around with those critical eyes. She barely touched my hand when I greeted her. She smiled, but it was a cold smile, a polite smile. Raphael didn't notice anything. He was too busy looking at her, too lost in that enchantment that blinds men when they think they've found the perfect woman. During dinner, Fabiana spoke little to me. She answered in monosyllables. She looked at her phone. She spoke to Raphael in English, sometimes in Italian. Soft words, verbal caresses. He melted. I watched. I tried to find something genuine in her, something real, something that justified the light in my son's eyes. But I found nothing. I only saw a calculating woman, a woman who knew exactly what to say, what to do, how to move, how to conquer. When they left, Raphael hugged me. He told me he loved Fabiana, that she was the one, that he had finally found someone special. I told him she seemed very nice, that I was glad to see him happy. I lied, because that's what mothers do when they know the truth will hurt, when they know their children aren't ready to hear it, when they know they wouldn't be believed anyway. The following months were strange. Raphael started visiting less. The calls became shorter, more spaced out. He always had plans with Fabiana. He was always busy. When I asked how things were, he only talked about her, about how wonderful she was, about how well they got along, about the places they went, about the perfect life they were building. I listened. I nodded. I swallowed the pain of being replaced, of becoming a supporting character in my own son's life. Then one day, Raphael came to my house with news. He was nervous, excited. He had that energy of men who are about to take an important step. He sat me down on the sofa. He took my hands. He told me he had proposed to Fabiana, that she had said yes, that they were getting married in 6 months, that he wanted me to be the first to know. I hugged him. I congratulated him. I told him I was very happy for him, and a part of me was. Because he was my son, because I loved him, because I wanted to see him happy. But another part of me, a dark and deep part, felt afraid. I felt something was wrong, that this was all too fast, too perfect, too planned. I asked if he had met Fabiana's family. He said no, that they lived in Italy, that they would come for the wedding, that Fabiana didn't have much contact with them because she had been traveling a lot for work, but that her mother Alma was coming next week, that she would stay for a month to help with the preparations, that she wanted to meet me. And so she did. Alma arrived, tall, elegant, with that air of superiority that people have who believe money is the only thing that matters. She greeted me coldly. She sized me up with her eyes, like someone looking at an old piece of furniture and deciding if it's worth keeping or throwing out. I tried to be nice. I tried to make conversation. I tried to build a bridge, but she wasn't interested. To her, I was invisible, insignificant, the groom's poor mother, someone to be tolerated out of politeness, nothing more. The months of preparations were a silent hell. I wasn't involved in anything. Fabiana and Alma decided everything. The venue, the decorations, the menu, the music, the guest list. Raphael would ask my opinion sometimes, but it was just a formality. Everything was already decided. I was just a name on the list. The groom's mother, seated at some faraway table, dressed in whatever they deemed appropriate, quiet, invisible, forgettable. But I watched. I saw how Fabiana managed Raphael, how she pulled him away from me, how every time I called she found a reason for him to be unable to talk long. How every time I suggested something she had a better idea. How little by little my son was becoming a stranger, someone I no longer recognized, someone who no longer needed me. And then came that dinner, that damn dinner the day before the wedding, the dinner where everything changed, where I stopped being the quiet, invisible mother, where I discovered my son wasn't just being pulled away from me. He was being destroyed, robbed, emptied, and I was the only one who could see it, the only one who could save him, the only one who understood every word of that macabre plan that Fabiana and Alma had woven with such patience. That night when I got back to my house, I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness replaying every word I had heard, every laugh, every detail of the plan, and I knew I couldn't stay silent, not this time. Not when my son was about to lose everything, not when I was the only one with the power to stop it, because I wasn't just a forgotten mother. I was a woman who had survived, who had fought, who had learned that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And now it was time to wake up. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices, those sweet, venomous voices speaking in Italian, planning, calculating, laughing at my son as if he were a game, as if destroying someone's life was just another day's work for them, as if my Raphael was just another number on their list of victims. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. The apartment was silent, that dense silence only people who live alone know, who sleep alone, who cry alone. I went to the kitchen. I made coffee. I sat at the table where Raphael had so often done his homework as a child, where we had eaten breakfast together on Sundays, where I had watched the man grow who was now about to marry a lie. I took out an old notebook, the kind you keep for years without knowing why, and I started to write. Every word I remembered, every phrase I had heard in that dining room, I wrote it all down, in Italian first. Then I translated it into Spanish. I needed to see it. I needed to read it. I needed to confirm it hadn't been a nightmare, that I had really heard what I thought I'd heard. Fabiana had said Raphael had $200,000 saved, that she had seen the documents, the bank statements, everything. Alma asked if she was sure. Fabiana said yes, that he had shown her everything when they bought the house together, that he trusted her completely, that he was a lovesick fool like all the others, like always, like every time. Alma had laughed, that laugh that haunted me in the dark, and she said the plan was still the same. Get married, wait 3 months, enough time so he wouldn't suspect, then start transferring the money, little by little, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, always with excuses. A family emergency in Italy, an investment deal, a unique opportunity. Men in love always say yes. They always trust. They always hand over everything, and when there was nothing left, they would disappear. Fabiana would ask for a divorce. She'd claim incompatibility. She'd take her share of the assets. The house they bought together was in both their names. That meant half was hers. And with a good lawyer, she could get more, much more. Alma said they had contacts, that they had done this before, that they knew exactly how to move every piece. And then Fabiana said something that broke my soul. She said the only good thing was that I wouldn't be a problem, that I was a poor, uneducated old woman, that I had no influence over Raphael, that I would probably end up in a nursing home when I couldn't take care of myself, that no one would listen to a woman like me. Alma agreed. She said mothers like me are easy to ignore, that sons always choose their wives over their mothers. Always. I read my notes over and over. Every word was a dagger. Not just because they were going to rob my son, but because they were right about one thing. Raphael had chosen her, not consciously, not maliciously. But he had left me behind. He had turned me into a ghost in his life, and now that ghost was the only person who could save him. The next day, I called Raphael. It was Sunday. We usually had lunch together on Sundays. But we hadn't in weeks. He answered after several rings. He sounded distracted. Busy. I asked if we could meet. He said he was with Fabiana buying things for the honeymoon, that they were very busy, that the wedding was in 5 days. I said I understood, that I just wanted to see him for a moment, that we hadn't talked alone in a long time. There was a silence. Long. Awkward. Then he said maybe in the afternoon, that he would call me. I hung up. He didn't call. That night I sent him a message. He didn't reply until the next day. It said he was sorry, that he had been exhausted, that he would see me at the wedding, that everything was crazy with the preparations. I read that message and knew I had already lost him, that Fabiana had him completely, that I was just an obstacle to be kept at a distance, but I couldn't give up. I couldn't let this happen. So I did something I had never done, something I was ashamed to even think about. I went to the bank where Raphael had his accounts. I didn't think I'd get anywhere. I had no access to his information. I had no legal right. But I knew one of the employees, Marta, an older woman who had worked there for 30 years. I had cleaned her house for years before I got my office job. We were friends, or something like it. I found her at her desk. She was surprised to see me. It had been a while. I told her I needed a favor, that it wasn't legal, that I would understand if she said no, but that it was for my son, that he was in danger. Marta looked at me with those tired eyes of people who have seen too much. She asked me what I needed. I told her I just wanted to confirm how much money Raphael had in his accounts, nothing more. I didn't want to make any transactions, just to know. Marta hesitated. She looked around. Then she sighed. She told me to wait. She went to her computer. She typed something. She frowned. She wrote something on a piece of paper and passed it to me discreetly. The number was worse than I thought. Raphael had $240,000. Not 200. 240,000. Years of work, of saving, of sacrifice. All there, waiting to be stolen by 2 women who saw him as an ATM with feelings. Marta asked if I was okay. I nodded. I thanked her. I left the bank, my legs shaking. That afternoon I searched the internet. I spent hours reading about marriage fraud, about women who marry men for money, about international schemes, about how they worked. The patterns were always the same. Beautiful women, foreigners, perfect stories, distant families, quick weddings, absolute trust. And then the disappearance, the divorce, the ruin. I found forums, stories, testimonies, destroyed men telling how they lost everything, their savings, their homes, their dignity. Some never recovered. Some declared bankruptcy, some just disappeared, swallowed by the shame and pain of having been so blind, of having trusted so much, of having loved the wrong person. And then I found something. A news story from 3 years ago, from a newspaper in Argentina, about 2 Italian women arrested for marriage fraud. They had scammed 5 men, over $500,000 in total. When I opened the attached photo, my heart stopped. It was them. Fabiana and Alma, younger, with different names, but it was them. The same eyes, the same smile, the same pose of calculated innocence. I read the entire article, shaking. They had been arrested, prosecuted. But something had gone wrong at trial. A legal technicality, lack of hard evidence. They were let go. They disappeared afterward, without a trace. And now they were here, in my city, about to marry my son. About to steal everything from him, about to leave him empty and broken like those other men. I printed the article, I printed the photo, I printed everything. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the papers. I had the proof. I had the evidence that Fabiana and Alma were not who they said they were, that this wasn't love, it was a crime, a meticulous plan, a robbery disguised as romance. But then I realized something. If I showed this to Raphael now, 5 days before the wedding, he wouldn't believe me. He'd think I was jealous, that I was making things up to ruin his happiness, that I was a possessive mother who couldn't let go of her son. Fabiana had done a perfect job of pushing him away from me, subtly poisoning our relationship, making me look like a sad, obsolete figure in his life. And even if he believed me, even if he saw the proof, she would find an explanation. She'd say it was a mistake, that it was other people, that it was a mix-up. And he would want to believe her, not me. Why does love do that? It blinds, it deafens, it kills the survival instinct. I sat on my living room floor with the papers scattered around me, and I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since Raphael's father left us. I cried for my son, for his innocence, for his blind trust, for all the pain he was about to suffer, and I cried for myself, for being invisible, for having no voice, for not being able to protect him even with the truth in my hands. But then something changed. In the midst of that crying, in the midst of that despair, I felt something new, something I hadn't felt in years. Fury, pure burning rage. I was not going to let this happen. I was not going to sit by and watch them destroy my son. I was not going to be the weak, invisible mother they thought I was. If Raphael wouldn't listen to me now, then I would have to wait. I'd have to be smarter, more patient. I'd have to let the wedding happen, let them feel safe, victorious. And then when they least expected it, when they thought they had won, I would strike, with the truth, with the proof, with the full weight of a mother who has nothing to lose except her son. Because they made a mistake, a fatal mistake. They thought I was invisible. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I didn't matter. But I had heard everything. I knew everything. And now I had proof. I had time. And I had the most powerful advantage of all. They didn't know that I knew. The next day, I called Leandra, my only true friend, the only person in this world who had always been there. We met 30 years ago working in the same factory. She was also a single mother. She had also been abandoned. She had also raised her children alone. We shared that silent pain that only women who have had to be both father and mother understand. Women who have had to be strong when all they wanted to do was fall apart. Leandra lives 3 blocks from my apartment, in an equally old building, equally sad. When I arrived, she was making tea. She's always making tea, says it's the only thing that calms her nerves. I sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where we had cried together so many times, where we had celebrated our children's birthdays, when we didn't have money for big parties, where we had planned how to survive each month on salaries that were never enough. I told her everything, every detail, from the dinner to what I'd heard in Italian, from the newspaper article to the $240,000 Raphael had in the bank. Leandra listened in silence. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She just listened with that patience of people who know what real pain is. The pain that has no words, the pain that can only be shared in silence. When I finished, she set her cup on the table. She looked at me with those tired but strong eyes, and she asked me what I was going to do. I told her I didn't know, that I had the proof, that I knew the truth, but that Raphael wouldn't listen to me, that they had him completely under their control, that if I tried to stop the wedding now, I would only make my son hate me, blame me, push me away forever. Leandra nodded. Then she told me something I'll never forget. She said that mothers have always had to fight battles no one sees, that we've always had to protect our children in ways they never understand, that sometimes love means doing things that break our own hearts, things that make us the villains of their stories, but that a true mother doesn't seek to be loved. She seeks for her children to survive. She asked if I remembered when she had to pull her eldest son out of that house where he lived with his girlfriend, the girlfriend who hit him, who manipulated him, who had isolated him from everyone. Her son hated her for months. He blamed her for ruining his life, for destroying his relationship. But Leandra didn't stop. She kept fighting. She kept being there. Until one day her son woke up. He saw the truth, and he thanked her for saving him, for loving him enough to be the bad guy in the story. I told her this was different, that Raphael was an adult, that he was 35, that I couldn't just pull him out of there. Leandra smiled, a sad smile, and she told me that I had to be smarter then, more strategic, that I couldn't attack head-on. I had to wait for the perfect moment, the moment where the truth was so obvious that Raphael couldn't deny it, where the proof was so overwhelming that there was no room for doubt. That afternoon, Leandra and I made a plan. A simple but effective plan. I wouldn't stop the wedding. I would let it happen. I would act like the perfect mother, smiling, happy, invisible as always. But in the meantime, I would investigate, gather more proof. I would follow Fabiana and Alma. I would document every suspicious move, every conversation, every strange meeting. Leandra knew someone, a private investigator. His name was Theodore. He had been a cop for 20 years before retiring. Now he worked independently. He did discreet investigations, surveillance, background checks. Leandra gave me his number. She told me I could trust him, that he was a good man, that he would understand my situation. I called Theodore that same night. I explained everything. I told him I didn't have much money, that I only had my savings, $3,000 I had saved for years for emergencies. Theodore told me it was enough, that he would do what he could, that he understood what it was like to have a child in danger. He had children too. He also knew what it meant to protect them. We met the next day at a coffee shop downtown. Theodore was a man in his 60s, gray hair, a face marked by time, but his eyes were sharp, attentive, the eyes of someone who had seen the dark side of people, who knew how to recognize danger, who knew when someone was lying. I showed him everything, the newspaper article, the photos, the notes of what I'd heard at dinner. Theodore read everything carefully. He took notes. He asked questions. He asked for addresses, full names, details about Fabiana and Alma, about Raphael, about the wedding, about everything. Then he looked at me and said something that chilled my blood. He said it was probably too late to stop the wedding, that these women were professionals, that they had years of experience, that they knew exactly how to manipulate legal situations, how to disappear without a trace. But that if we acted quickly after the wedding, if we gathered enough evidence before they started stealing the money, we could stop them. He explained that I needed hard evidence, not just the old article. I needed proof that Fabiana and Alma were still the same people from the article, fake documents, travel records, connections to other frauds, and most importantly, I needed to record them, to capture them admitting their plan. That would be what convinced Raphael. That would be what destroyed them legally. I asked him how. How could we record them if they were suspicious of everyone, if they only spoke to each other in Italian, if I was invisible to them? Theodore thought for a moment. Then he told me that my invisibility was my greatest advantage, that people aren't careful about what they say in front of those they consider insignificant, that if I could get close to them again, if I could create a situation where they felt comfortable talking, we could capture everything. He gave me a small device, an audio recorder, the size of a lighter. He explained how to use it, how to activate it without anyone noticing. He told me to carry it with me always, that if any opportunity arose to be near Fabiana and Alma, I should turn it on, that I should record everything, that it didn't matter if it was in Italian. We would translate that later. The important thing was to have their voices, their words, their confession. He also gave me his card. He told me to call him if I saw anything suspicious, anything, any strange movement, any out-of-place meeting. He would start investigating their backgrounds, looking for connections to other cases, tracking their past. He promised me he would do everything possible to protect my son. When I left that coffee shop, I felt different. I was no longer just a desperate mother. I was a woman with a plan, with an ally, with tools. I was no longer alone in this battle. I had Leandra, I had Theodore, and I had something more important. I had purpose. I had a mission to save my son, no matter the cost. The days before the wedding passed slowly and painfully. Raphael barely called. When he did, he sounded distracted, stressed. He said there were 1,000 things to do, that Fabiana was nervous, that everything had to be perfect. I told him everything would be fine, that it would be a beautiful day. I was lying, because I knew it wouldn't be beautiful. I knew it would be the beginning of his destruction. Fabiana called me 2 days before the wedding. It surprised me. She never called me. She said they needed me to arrive early on the day of the ceremony, that there was a family meeting beforehand, just close family. Her Alma, Raphael, and me. She told me it was an Italian tradition, a family blessing before the wedding. I accepted. Of course I accepted, because I knew this could be my chance. I told Theodore. He told me the meeting was perfect, that I should have the recorder activated from the moment I walked in, that it didn't matter how long it lasted, that I should record everything, that they would probably speak freely in Italian, thinking I didn't understand, that this was our golden opportunity. The night before the wedding, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that could go wrong, about everything I was about to lose, because if this didn't work, if I failed to stop them, I would lose Raphael forever. Not just his money, not just his future. I would lose him, my son, the only person who had given me a purpose in this life. But I also thought about what would happen if I did nothing, if I stayed silent, if I let this happen without a fight. Raphael would lose everything, his money, his trust, his ability to love. He would become another broken man, another victim, another sad story on the internet. And I would have to live with that guilt, with knowing I could have saved him and didn't. So I made a decision that would change everything. It didn't matter if Raphael hated me afterward. It didn't matter if he never forgave me. It didn't matter if I became the villain of his story. I would save him, because that's what mothers do. They don't look for applause. They don't look for gratitude. They look for their children to survive, even if it means sacrificing themselves, even if it means disappearing, even if it means dying a little in the process. I got up at dawn. I dressed carefully. A simple dress, gray, discreet, the kind of dress worn by a mother who doesn't want to draw attention. I put the recorder in my purse. I checked it 3 times to make sure it worked. I practiced turning it on without looking. How to keep it close without being obvious. How to be invisible while recording everything. Before leaving, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I saw a woman I no longer recognized. A 61-year-old woman who looked older, tired, worn out. But in her eyes, there was something new, something that hadn't been there before. Determination, strength, fire. Because invisible women aren't always asleep. Sometimes they are just waiting for the moment to wake up. And that moment had arrived. The wedding morning dawned gray. Heavy clouds covered the sky as if the universe knew something bad was about to happen. I took a taxi to the hotel where the ceremony would be held. An elegant place, too elegant for me, too expensive, too perfect, the kind of place where rich people get married, or people who plan to steal from them. I arrived 30 minutes before the agreed-upon time for the family meeting. My hands were shaking. I had checked the recorder 5 times on the way. It was working. Hidden in my purse, ready to capture every word, every confession, every mistake Fabiana and Alma might make. The receptionist told me to go up to the third floor, Suite 312, the bridal suite, where Fabiana and Alma were getting ready, where we were supposed to have that family blessing, that Italian tradition that was probably another lie. Another trick to keep up appearances. I knocked on the door. Alma opened it. She was wearing a cream-colored silk robe. Her hair was perfectly done, even though the ceremony was still hours away. She looked me up and down, as always, with that barely concealed contempt. She let me in without smiling, without really greeting me. Just a nod of her head, like someone letting in a person they have no choice but to tolerate. Fabiana was sitting in front of a huge mirror. A makeup artist was working on her face. She saw me in the reflection. She raised a hand, a minimal greeting. Cold. She continued talking on the phone in Italian. Something about flowers, about the decorations. Her voice was sweet, charming. The voice of a happy bride, the voice of a consummate actress. I asked about Raphael. Alma told me he was in another room getting ready, that we would see him at the ceremony, that this meeting was just for the women of the family, to share an intimate moment before the big day. I nodded. I sat on a sofa near the window. I discreetly took the recorder out of my purse. I placed it on my lap, covered by my shawl, activated, recording. The makeup artist finished and left. Fabiana stood up. She admired herself in the mirror. She turned. She smiled. She was beautiful. I have to admit, she was a beautiful woman, the kind of beauty that deceives, that seduces, that makes men forget to use their reason, that makes my son hand over his entire life without asking questions. Alma poured champagne. 3 glasses. She offered me one. I took it, although I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to cloud my mind. I needed to be alert, aware, recording every second. But refusing would have been strange. It would have drawn attention. So I took the glass. I held it. I barely wet my lips. Fabiana raised her glass. She made a toast, in Italian, to family, to love, to the future. Beautiful words, empty words. Alma toasted with her. So did I, pretending I understood some words, pretending I was just another excited guest, another happy mother, another fool who knew nothing. Then Alma locked the door. I heard the click of the deadbolt. My heart sped up, but I stayed calm. I kept my face serene, expressionless, the face of a woman who understands nothing, who sees nothing, who doesn't matter. Fabiana and Alma sat down together on the sofa across from me. They began to talk, in Italian, quickly, confidently, thinking I was just a piece of furniture, an object without ears, without a mind, without importance. And that's when everything changed, when they began to reveal more than they had planned. Alma asked if Raphael had already signed the house papers. Fabiana said yes, that everything was in both their names, 50-50, that the house was worth $300,000, that when they divorced, she would get half, $150,000, plus the $240,000 from the accounts. That in total it would be almost $400,000. Alma laughed. She said it was the best job they had done so far. Fabiana said Raphael was perfect, naive, in love, controllable, that he never suspected anything, that he believed every word she said, that it was pathetic how stupid men became when they thought they had found true love. Alma agreed. She said all men were the same. That ego was their weakness, that they felt special when a beautiful woman chose them, that they never asked why. Then they talked about me. Fabiana said I was the only problem, but a minor one, that I had no influence, that Raphael barely called me, that after the wedding he would see me even less, that eventually I would disappear from his life completely, like all annoying parents, like all useless people. Alma said it was better that way, that old mothers always cause problems, that it's better to cut them off from the beginning, that Raphael was already learning to prioritize his wife over his mother, that this was exactly what they needed. A man with no strings, no family to ask questions, no one who could interfere when they started moving the money. I was still there, sitting, motionless, with the hidden recorder capturing every word, every laugh, every detail of their diabolical plan. My heart was beating so hard I thought they could hear it, but I kept my face empty, my gaze distant, as if I were thinking about something else, as if I didn't understand a single thing they were saying. Fabiana looked at her watch. She said it was time to wrap this up, that the ceremony started in 2 hours, that they needed to finish getting ready. Alma nodded. They stood up. So did I. Fabiana smiled at me, that fake, perfect smile. She told me in Spanish, "Thank you for coming," that it meant a lot to have me there, that I was important to Rafael. Lies. All lies. But I smiled back. I said I was happy to be there, that it was a beautiful day. I left that room with shaky legs, with the recorder burning in my purse, with the certainty that I had everything I needed, their voices, their complete plan, their confession. Now, I just had to decide when to use it, when to detonate this bomb that would destroy everything. I went down to the hotel lobby, the recorder burning in my purse as if it were a radioactive secret. My hands were shaking. I needed to get out, to breathe, to think. But I couldn't leave. The ceremony was in less than 2 hours. I had to stay. I had to act as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just heard the full confession of 2 criminals planning to destroy my son. I found a restroom on the first floor. I locked myself in one of the stalls. I took out the recorder. I stopped it. I checked it. It had recorded everything. 42 minutes of audio, 42 minutes of pure evidence, of undeniable truth. I put the device away again. I hid it in the bottom of my purse, safer than my own life. I called Theodore. He answered on the second ring, and I told him I had the recording, that it had worked, that they had spoken freely, that I had everything, the numbers, the plan, the dates, everything. Theodore congratulated me. He said this was exactly what we needed, that now we had to decide when to act. I asked him what I should do, if I should stop the wedding now, show Rafael the recording before he got married, before it was too late. Theodore was silent for a moment. Then he told me something I didn't expect. He said no, that if I stopped the wedding now, Fabiana and Alma could escape. They could deny everything. They could say the recording was manipulated, that it was a misunderstanding, that I was making things up because I didn't want my son to get married. He explained that we needed something more. We needed evidence that they were actually trying to steal the money, not just words. Actions, bank movements, transfer attempts. That would sink them legally. That would make it impossible for them to escape. He told me to let the wedding happen, to wait, to watch, and as soon as they tried to move the money to call him, then we would act. I hung up, feeling empty. I knew Theodore was right, but the thought of watching my son marry that woman, watching him promise eternal love to someone who only wanted to destroy him, of staying silent while he handed his life over to a lie, it was unbearable. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing someone is about to die and not being able to scream, not being able to warn them, not being able to stop anything. I left the restroom. I went up to the hall where the ceremony would be. People were already arriving, elegant guests, well-dressed, smiling, oblivious to everything. Soft music was playing in the background. White flowers decorated every corner. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful. Everything was a lie. I found my seat, table 7, far from the altar, far from the head table, where the people who don't matter sit, the filler guests, the names on the list who are only there out of obligation. I sat alone. No one came to greet me. No one came to talk. I was the groom's mother, but I was invisible, forgotten, irrelevant. The music changed. The bridal march began. Everyone stood up. Me too. Rafael entered first. My son, my boy, dressed in a black suit, groomed, nervous, happy, with that smile that broke my heart, because it was the smile of someone who believes his life is just beginning, who doesn't know it's actually ending. Then she entered, Fabiana, walking on Alma's arm because she had no father to give her away, or so she said. She was wearing white. Of course. The dress was long, elegant, perfect, like everything about her, like the whole lie she had built. The guests sighed. They murmured about how beautiful she looked. I just saw a thief, a predator, a snake wrapped in lace. Raphael looked at her as if she were a miracle, as if he couldn't believe his luck. My poor boy, he didn't know it wasn't luck. It was a trap, a calculated plan, a hunt where he was the prey, and he had already fallen into the net. The ceremony began. The priest spoke of love, of fidelity, of commitment, beautiful words spoken in a grotesque context because there was no love there, no fidelity, no real commitment. There was only acting, only fraud, only evil disguised as romance. When it came time for the vows, I felt like I was choking. Raphael promised to love her forever, in sickness and in health, in richness and in poverty. What irony! Soon there would only be poverty, because she would take everything. Fabiana also said her vows. Her voice was soft, emotional, perfect. Tears decorated her cheeks, an actress's tears, rehearsed tears, empty tears. The priest declared them husband and wife. They kissed. The guests applauded. I clapped too, because I had to, because I was still invisible, because I was still acting. But inside I was dying. Inside I was screaming. Inside I was begging for this to be a nightmare I would soon wake up from. The reception was worse. Raphael and Fabiana danced their first dance as spouses. He looked at her with adoration. She smiled with triumph. Alma watched from her table with satisfaction, like someone watching a plan execute perfectly, like someone who knows they've already won, that everything is already secured, that it's only a matter of time. Raphael came to my table only once. He hugged me. He told me he was happy, that Fabiana was the best thing that had ever happened to him, that he had finally found his place in the world. I told him I was happy for him, that he looked very happy, that I loved him. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and left. Back to his new wife, back to his new life, far away from me. Fabiana never came near my table, not once. Neither did Alma. I was air. I was a shadow. I was nothing. Exactly as they wanted. Exactly as they had planned. While they celebrated, while they toasted, while they laughed with the guests, I sat there, watching, waiting, mentally recording every detail, every gesture, every knowing glance between mother and daughter. The party ended around midnight. Raphael and Fabiana left in an elegant car for the airport. Honeymoon in Italy. 2 weeks. Rome, Florence, Venice. Places I knew. Places where I had lived. But they didn't know that. That was my secret, my weapon, my invisible power. I took a taxi back home. The apartment was dark, cold, silent. I sat on the sofa without turning on the lights. I took out the recorder. I held it in my hands. This little thing held the truth. It held the future. It held my son's salvation or his destruction. It was up to me to decide when to use it, how to use it, if I would have the courage to do it when the time came. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake thinking about Raphael as a child, about how he used to hug me before bed, about how he'd tell me I was his favorite person in the world, about how he'd promised to always take care of me, a child's promises, promises forgotten when you grow up, when life takes you far away, when other people take the place that was once yours. But I hadn't forgotten my promises. I promised to protect him the day he was born. I promised to always be there. I promised to save him from any danger. And that promise was still valid, even if he no longer needed me, even if he no longer saw me, even if I was invisible in his life. I was still his mother, and mothers don't give up. Ever. The 2 weeks Raphael spent in Italy were the longest of my life. Every day was an agony. Every night was a hell of dark thoughts. I imagined Fabiana showing him Rome, the same streets I had walked 30 years ago, the same places where I had been young, where I had loved, where I had lost. She was walking through my past without knowing it, and I was here, waiting, planning, preparing for the moment when everything would explode. Theodore called me every 2 days. He kept me updated on his investigation. He had found more information on Fabiana and Alma. They weren't really Italian. They were born in Argentina. Their real names were different. They had changed their identities 3 times in the last 10 years. They had been in Chile, in Peru, in Colombia. Always the same pattern, always the same crime. Men in love, quick weddings, emptied accounts, disappearances. Theodore had contacted 2 of the previous victims, broken men who had lost everything. One lost $120,000. The other lost almost $200,000. They both said the same thing, that they never saw it coming, that Fabiana was perfect, that the love seemed real, that by the time they discovered the truth, it was too late. The money was gone. They were gone, and they were left ruined, destroyed, ashamed. One of them had tried to kill himself. The other lost his house, his job, his dignity. Now they lived small, broken lives, trying to rebuild themselves from the ashes. When Theodore told me this, I cried. I cried thinking that could be Raphael's future. My son turned into another broken man, another statistic, another victim no one would remember. But that wasn't going to happen, not as long as I was breathing, not as long as I had the recording, not as long as I had the truth in my hands. Raphael would return from that honeymoon happy, in love, blind, but I would be ready, waiting for the exact moment, the moment Fabiana made her first mistake, her first move for the money. Theodore also taught me something crucial. He showed me how to monitor Raphael's bank accounts without direct access. Marta, my friend at the bank, helped us. She would alert us if there were any strange movements, large transfers, changes in beneficiaries, anything suspicious. It was illegal. We knew that. But sometimes saving someone requires breaking certain rules. Sometimes a mother's love exists outside the law. Raphael returned from Italy on a Tuesday afternoon. He called me that night. He sounded happy, relaxed. He told me about the trip, about the cities they visited, about the food, about what a great time they had. Fabiana shouted something in the background, a greeting. Fake, forced. Raphael laughed. He told me she said hello, that we would all see each other soon. I said yes, that I'd love that. A lie. I never wanted to see her again, but I had to keep acting. 3 weeks passed. Raphael didn't call much. When he did, the conversations were short, shallow. He said he was busy, that they were adjusting to married life, that they were fixing up the house, making plans, building their future. I listened. I asked few questions. I didn't want to press. I didn't want Fabiana to feel I was a threat. I needed them to keep seeing me as what I had always been, invisible, harmless, forgettable. Then the call from Marta came. It was a Friday morning. Her voice sounded nervous. She told me there was activity in Raphael's account, a transfer, $50,000 to an overseas account, Cayman Islands. Marta gave me all the details, the account number, the date, the exact time. I thanked her. I told her she had saved my son. She told me she hoped so, that she would pray for us. I called Theodore immediately. I gave him the information. He told me this was it. This was the moment. We had everything now. The recording, the background checks, and now the actual theft attempt. He told me to contact Raphael, to ask to see him urgently, not to tell him why, just that it was important, that it was about his life, his future, everything. I called Raphael. He answered after several rings. He sounded busy. I told him I needed to see him, that it was urgent, that I couldn't explain over the phone. He sighed. He said he was busy, that he had meetings. I said please, that it was the first time in years I had asked him for something like this, that I really needed him. There was a silence. Then he agreed. He said we'd meet the next day, in the afternoon, at a coffee shop near his office. That night I prepared everything, the recording on a USB drive, the documents Theodore had compiled, the newspaper articles, the photos, the statements from the other victims, everything organized, everything ready to be shown, to be revealed, to destroy the lie that had surrounded my son for 2 years. I didn't sleep. I stayed up rehearsing what I would say, how I would start, how I would explain that I had been investigating, that I had recorded a private conversation, that I had violated his privacy, his trust, how I would make him understand that everything I had done was out of love, out of protection, out of that maternal instinct that can't stay still when her child is in danger. I also thought about how he would react. If he would believe me, if he would get angry, if he would think I was crazy, jealous, making things up. I knew Fabiana had done a perfect job of pushing him away from me, making me look like a problematic possessive mother, unable to let go of her son. Raphael probably already had that image of me in his head. Fabiana had probably already planted those seeds of doubt. But I had something stronger than her manipulations. I had the truth. I had proof. I had Fabiana's voice confessing her plan. I had the bank movements. I had everything. And the truth always wins, eventually, painfully. But it wins. Saturday arrived. I dressed carefully. I put all the documents in my purse. I put the USB with the recording in a special pocket, close to my heart, as if it were the most valuable thing I owned. And it was. It was my son's salvation. It was the end of the nightmare. It was the moment I would stop being invisible. I took the bus to the coffee shop. I arrived 30 minutes early. I ordered a coffee I didn't drink. I sat at a table in the back. I waited. Every minute was an eternity. Every second brought me closer to the moment when everything would change, when my relationship with Raphael would either break or be saved, when I would become his hero or his enemy. There was no middle ground. There was no turning back. Raphael walked in exactly at the agreed-upon time. He saw me. He walked toward me. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. His face was thinner, as if he wasn't sleeping well, as if something was eating him up inside. He sat down across from me. He asked me what was wrong. Why the urgency? What was so important? It couldn't wait. I looked at him, at my son, at my boy. Now, a 35-year-old man who thought his life was perfect, who thought he had found love, who didn't know he was married to a criminal. I took a deep breath. I took the USB drive out of my purse. I placed it on the table between us. And I said the words that would change everything. The words I had rehearsed 1,000 times. The words that would either save him or destroy me. I said, Raphael, I need you to listen to something. I need you to trust me, even if you haven't in a long time. Because what I'm about to show you is going to hurt. It's going to shatter you. But it will save your life. Raphael looked at me confused. He picked up the USB drive. He studied it as if it were dangerous, as if he knew that what it contained would change everything. He asked me what it was, what was going on, why I was acting so strange. I told him I needed my laptop, that he had to listen to something, that after that, everything would make sense. I took my old laptop out of my bag. I turned it on. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold it. Raphael kept looking at me. There was something in his eyes, worry, fear, as if a part of him already knew that what was coming was terrible. I inserted the USB. I opened the audio file. Before I played it, I looked at him one last time. I told him I loved him, that I had always loved him, that everything I had done was to protect him. He nodded, nervously. I said the recording was in Italian, that I understood every word, that I would explain everything afterward, but that first he needed to listen. I pressed play. The voices of Fabiana and Alma filled the space between us, clear, crisp, confessing everything. Raphael frowned. He didn't understand the language. He looked at me searching for an explanation. I raised a hand. I asked him to wait, to keep listening. The recording continued. Fabiana talking about the $240,000. Alma laughing. Planning how to transfer the money, how to disappear, how they had done this before, how Raphael was just another lovesick fool. I stopped the recording. Raphael was pale. He asked me what they were talking about, who those voices were, though I think he already knew. I think his heart was already telling him the truth his mind didn't want to accept. I told him it was Fabiana and Alma, that the recording was from his wedding day, in the hotel suite, that I had been there, that I had heard them planning to rob him, to destroy him, to leave him with nothing. Raphael shook his head. He said it was impossible, that it had to be a mistake, that I didn't understand Italian, that I had probably misunderstood something. His voice was trembling, desperate, clinging to the lie because the truth was too painful. I told him I lived in Italy for 15 years, that I spoke the language perfectly, that I understood every word, every plan, every detail of how they planned to destroy him. He fell silent, processing. His world was falling apart. I could see it in his eyes. I translated word for word what they had said. The $240,000, the house, the divorce plan, the previous victims, everything. Raphael listened, his face growing whiter. His hands clenched on the table, knuckles white, his whole body trembling. Then I took out the documents, the newspaper articles, the photos of Fabiana and Alma with different names, the statements from the other victims, the records of the fake accounts, everything Theodore had gathered for weeks. I placed it all in front of Raphael. I told him to look, to read, to see who the woman he had married really was. Raphael took the papers with trembling hands. He read. His eyes scanned every line, every photo, every irrefutable piece of proof that his wife was a professional con artist, a criminal, a walking lie. When he got to the photos of the arrest in Argentina, something in him broke. He dropped the papers, he covered his face with his hands, and he began to cry. My son, my boy, crying like he hadn't cried since he was little, crying for the love he thought was real, for the life he thought he was building, for the future he had just discovered was an illusion. I got up. I went around the table. I hugged him. He let me. He clung to me like he did when he was 5 and had nightmares, like when his father left us, like when the world was too big and I was his only refuge. I told him I was sorry, that I wished I had been wrong, that I wished Fabiana had been real, but that I couldn't let him lose everything without doing anything, that I was his mother, that my job was to protect him, even if it meant breaking his heart, even if it meant becoming the bearer of the worst news of his life. Raphael pulled away from me. He wiped his tears. He asked me what else there was. I told him about the transfer, the $50,000 Fabiana had moved yesterday to an offshore account. I showed him the records Marta had given me. Raphael took out his phone. He opened his banking app. He checked. And there it was, the transfer, $50,000. Gone. The first step of the plan. The beginning of the theft. His face transformed. The sadness gave way to something darker. Rage. Contained fury. He asked me what else I had discovered. I told him about Theodore, about the investigation, about the other victims, about how Fabiana and Alma had been doing this for years, in different countries, with different names, always the same crime, always getting away with it. Until now. Raphael asked what he should do. I told him we had to act fast, that Fabiana was probably planning to move more money soon, that we had to freeze the accounts, contact a lawyer, go to the police, present the evidence, stop them before they disappeared, because that's what they would do, as soon as they sensed danger, as soon as they suspected they'd been discovered. They would disappear, like ghosts, like they had always done. I gave him Theodore's number. I told him to call him, that he knew what to do, that he had contacts in the police, that he could help us build a solid case. Raphael nodded. He dialed the number with shaky hands. He spoke to Theodore. He listened. He took notes. When he hung up, he looked at me with a mixture of pain and determination. He told me Theodore was coming in an hour, that we would go to the police station together, that we would present everything, the recording, the documents, the transfer, everything. He asked me how I knew, how I had discovered all this. I told him about the dinner, about how I'd heard them speaking in Italian, about how I had kept my secret for years, about how that silence had become my most powerful weapon. Raphael looked at me differently, as if he were seeing a person he didn't know, as if his invisible mother had suddenly sprung to life, taken form, gained power. He told me he was sorry, that he had been a bad son, that he had left me behind, that he had prioritized Fabiana over me, that he had let her push me away, that he should have listened when I tried to warn him, even though I had never warned him directly, even though I had always kept my doubts to myself, because that's what mothers are like, silent until there's no choice but to speak. I told him he didn't have to apologize, that he had done what any man in love does. Trust, hope for the best, that it wasn't his fault he had been manipulated by professionals, by women who had spent years perfecting their crime, their act, their art of destroying lives. Theodore arrived exactly an hour later. It was the first time Raphael had met him. They shook hands. Theodore showed him more evidence, more connections, more victims, more proof that Fabiana and Alma were part of an international marriage fraud ring. Raphael listened to it all, his jaw tight, his eyes dry now, no more tears, just determination, just the need for justice. The three of us went to the police station together. Raphael filed the formal complaint: fraud, theft, identity theft. The detectives listened to the recording. They reviewed the documents. They contacted Interpol. They discovered that Fabiana and Alma had outstanding arrest warrants in 2 countries, that they had been on the run for years, that they had finally been found, thanks to a mother who refused to stay silent, to a mother who turned her invisibility into her superpower. The detectives said they would arrest Fabiana and Alma that night. Raphael gave them the address to his house, the house he had bought dreaming of a future that never existed. The detectives told him not to go back there, to stay somewhere else, that they would handle everything. Raphael nodded. He looked at me. He asked if he could stay with me, in my small old apartment. I said yes. Of course yes. Always yes. That night, Raphael slept on the sofa in my apartment, the same sofa he had slept on so many times as a child, where he did his homework, where we watched movies on Sundays. He was back, broken, destroyed. But he was back, and I was there, as I had always been, as I always would be. I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake in my room listening to his uneven breathing. I knew he wasn't really sleeping. I knew he was just lying there in the dark processing everything, the deceit, the betrayal, the humiliation, how he had been so blind, how he hadn't seen the signs, how he had given his entire life to a lie. At 3 a.m, I got a call from one of the detectives. They told me they had arrested Fabiana and Alma, that they found them packing, preparing to flee. They had plane tickets for early the next morning, destination Spain. From there they would probably disappear again, change identities, look for the next victim. But they couldn't anymore. They had been caught. I told Raphael in the morning. He didn't say anything, just nodded, as if he had no emotions left, as if he were empty inside. We ate breakfast in silence, coffee and toast, like when he was little, like when it was just the 2 of us against the world. We had returned to that place, but now he was a destroyed man, and I was the woman who had saved him. The next few days were legal chaos, lawyers, statements, interviews with the police. The media found out. The story was on the news. Mother uncovers marriage scam, saves son. They sought me out for interviews. I refused them all. I didn't want fame. I didn't want recognition. I just wanted Raphael to be safe. The legal process took months. Fabiana and Alma were formally charged. They would face charges in multiple countries. The other victims began to come forward, to tell their stories, to seek justice. Raphael got his $50,000 back. The transfer was reversed. The house was put solely in his name. He began divorce proceedings, annulment due to fraud, everything. During that time, Raphael lived with me. He returned to my small apartment, to my simple life. He became my son again. Not the distant man who visited out of obligation, but my boy, my Raphael. We ate breakfast together. We ate dinner together. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He asked me about Italy, about those 15 years he never knew about. I told him everything. How I went there after his father left us, how I worked cleaning the homes of Italian families, how I learned the language in the streets, in the markets. from the old women who taught me while I mopped their floors, how I eventually got a better job, how I saved every cent to come back and give him a better life. Raphael cried when I told him. He said he never knew how much I had sacrificed, how much I had left behind, how much I had suffered in silence. I told him that's what mothers do. They suffer in silence. They sacrifice without asking for recognition. They protect even when no one sees. They love even when it's not returned. Because a mother's love doesn't seek a reward. It just seeks for her children to survive. One day Raphael asked me why I had never told him about Italy before, why I had kept that secret for so long. I told him the truth. You never asked. That he had always been so busy with his own life that he was never curious about mine, that I had become invisible to him. And invisible people keep secrets, not out of malice, but because no one is interested in hearing them. That destroyed him. He realized how much he had ignored me, how much he had taken me for granted, how he had allowed Fabiana to erase me from his life. He asked me to forgive him. He cried in my arms like he did when he was a child. He promised me he would never make me invisible again, that he would never leave me behind again, that he had learned the most painful lesson of his life, that the only person who truly loved him unconditionally was me, his mother, the woman he had forgotten. Fabiana and Alma were sentenced to 8 years in prison. 8 years for multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. They would be deported to Argentina after serving their time. They could never come back. The other victims also got some justice. Some recovered part of their money. Others at least had the closure of knowing the criminals who destroyed them would finally pay. Raphael sold the house. He said he couldn't live there, that every corner reminded him of the lie, the deceit. He bought a smaller apartment, simpler, close to mine. Now we see each other 3 times a week. We have breakfast on Sundays, dinner on Wednesdays. We talk on the phone every day. I am part of his life again. I am no longer invisible. 2 weeks ago, Raphael met someone, a woman from his work. Her name is Leandra, like my friend. He says she's different, that she's real, that he's taking it slow, that he's learned not to trust blindly, that he asks questions now, that he observes, that he listens to his gut, and that he wants her to meet me from the beginning, that my opinion matters, that he will never again make important decisions without talking to me first. Yesterday he confessed something to me. He said that for months he had nightmares, that he dreamed of Fabiana emptying his accounts, destroying his life, leaving him with nothing, that he would wake up sweating, trembling, but that in every nightmare at the end, I would appear, that my voice would wake him up, that my hands would pull him out of the darkness, that I had saved him in more ways than I knew. I told him that's what mothers do. They appear in the darkness. They pull their children from the abyss, even when no one sees them, even when no one acknowledges them, even when they are invisible to the rest of the world. For their children, they are always there, in the nightmares, in the hard times, in the silence, waiting, watching, protecting. This morning I woke up and found a letter under my door. It was from Raphael, handwritten. It said things he had never told me, that I was the strongest woman he knew, that his hero didn't wear a cape. She wore a gray dress and carried an old purse, that his hero had been invisible her whole life, but that now he saw her, that he would always see her, that he would never forget her again, that she had given him life twice. Once when he was born, and again when she saved him from marrying a lie. I cried reading that letter. I cried for the years of loneliness, for the years of being ignored, forgotten, discarded. But I also cried with happiness, because my son finally saw me. He valued me. He loved me in the way I always needed to be loved, with presence, with gratitude, with recognition for everything I had always done in silence. Now when I look in the mirror, I no longer see an invisible woman. I see a warrior, a woman who speaks 3 languages, who lived in another country, who raised a son alone, who worked until she broke to give him everything, who saved him from a deadly trap using only her intelligence and her love. I see a woman who deserves to be seen, who deserves to take up space, who deserves to be heard, And my name is no longer just Mom. My name is Clotilde Salas, 61 years old, survivor, fighter, mother, a woman who refused to stay silent when her son was in danger, a woman who turned her invisibility into power, her silence into strategy, her love into salvation. They thought I was a silly old woman who didn't understand anything. They thought I was invisible, insignificant, easy to ignore. But they were wrong, because mothers never sleep. They are always watching. They are always protecting. And when they wake up, the world trembles. My story is just beginning. Because now I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. And I will never again let anyone make me invisible. Never again.